People ask me about Zuffa boxing, what I think of it, and I just told you about three fight cards. Incidentally, I was 3 for 3 with these picks. I picked Walsh. I went with my heart in the fight, and he won. But um, the truth of the matter is that all these fights were competitive, and more important, there were a lot of middleweights fighting in this over the weekend, and it caused me to really dissect the middleweight division. And I feel good about it. I feel good about the middleweight division. You know why? Because there's a lot of younger middleweights that you may not have heard of yet, um, that are fighting each other. And what I'm seeing, are fighters that are improving, fighters that are fighting each other, fighters that are aggressive, fan friendly fighters, which I think is going to go a long way. And well, here's my example, and no disrespect to White Magic Maliki Jr. He's a fighter. He's fought in the New Jersey circuit, and he's fighting this weekend in Atlantic City in his hometown. And Vito is got a record of 22 wins, one loss, and 13 of his wins coming by knockout. He's taken on undefeated Omar Huyata. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Who's undefeated at 15 wins, no losses, one draw, and he too has 13 knockouts. Um, Here's my point, boys and girls. If you dissect this fight and you take a look, Maliki happens to be ranked number 5 by the WBO, number 9 by the IBF, and number 10 by the WBC. The computer sees him at number 13, and you know how good. I always feel real good about how the IBO's computer ranks their computers, not their computers, but computer fighters with their computer in general. And I like the IBO Top 100. I think it's the most accurate, and they have Maliki at number 12 in the world. Um, so Maliki is one of these young middleweights that we need to keep an eye on. Here's my problem with this fight, and here's my problem with the what we've been kind of forced to accept. Now, here I just talked about, and I'm going to bring it up again in a second here. I just talked about 3 or 4 middleweight contests that were really exciting, and they featured young middleweights going against each other, both with similar records, similar talent, and they made really good fights. And I got news for you: the fighters that did not come out with the Ws are not going to lose their value, because there's going to be another one that's going to fight, and they're going to win, and they're going to keep rising. That's how boxing needs to work, not like this. When you look at this guy that he's fighting, Maliki, again, no disrespect to Maliki, this guy who's fighting is 15-0. I say this guy because I've never heard of him. And of his 16 pro fights, 15-0-1, 13 knockouts. Oh, he's a power puncher. 16 pro fights, boys and girls. Three, count them, 1, 2, 3 of his opponents of 16 fights had winning records. And 2 of those 3 had a 1-0 record. I mean, 1-0 is winning, right? But it's one fight. And not only that, the third, his winning record, 9 wins, 8 losses, and a draw. There's not one known familiar name, even if they had a relative who fought, is on his resume at all. How does the computer see him? At number 175. Now I ask you this: why would a guy like Vito Maliki Jr., who's ranked in the sanctioning bodies that I said, who's in the top 12, as high as the top 12 in the IBO 100, why would he take on such a less than stellar opponent that isn't going to challenge him or make him any better? And when these other fighters I was talking about were they did challenge themselves, and they both looked good, even though one won and one lost. Now, when I take a look at the middleweight division right now, remember something: the 2 most glorious divisions in boxing are the heavyweight division traditionally. and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great fighters in other divisions. I happen to like a lot of other divisions in addition to the two I'm going to mention. But the two glamour divisions that, throughout, the last century has been the heavyweight division and the middleweight division. And we've seen a lot of great all time greats from both of these weight classes. When I look at some of these young, up and coming middleweights, I get excited. Now I'm going to put Malicki in that category because he's clearly a guy to keep an eye on. But the ones that aren't don't seem to be afraid of losing their O, and in my opinion, will become the future of the middleweight division, especially the way boxing seems to be leaning right now. George Liddard, which was a guy that fought this past weekend, this kid Giorgio Visoli, what an action-packed, exciting fighter. Remember the name. You're going to see him again. Callum Walsh, you've seen him fight. He's fought uh, on some of the bigger shows now, and he's a middleweight coming up. He's young, and of course the guy who we're having on tonight, Frank the Tank Hogan. So I mean that's just naming a handful. Then when you take a look at I'm going to call them the ranked middleweight sanctioned fighters. In other words, the sanctioning body ranks their own. So there's a whole bunch of them. There's four major sanctioning bodies, but some of the contenders. I mean, Yoinli Hernandez is he's a top fighter. Everybody knows that he's a top fighter. He's ranked in the Ring and ESPN and all the places that matter. In addition to most of the sanctioning bodies, you still got former champion Tim Tszyu, Amari Jones, Brad Pauls, Chris Eubank Jr., Aaron McKenna, Troy Isley, Connor Benn, and I'm going to say Austin Williams. I mean, these are all contenders that are good. And then if you take a look at the current champs like Carlos Adames or Slandy Lara, and I'm going to murder this cat's name, Yanibek Alumkohuli. We don't know what's going on with him, but those are some decent champs. And then here's the other thing. If you take a look at the top champions in the junior middleweight division, and you got Sebastian Fundora, who's fighting this weekend. There's no reason he's not going to be able to move up to middleweight. Don't be surprised if you see Xander Zayas and Boots Ennis. I mean, Boots Ennis is a big guy. He's a couple of cheeseburgers away from the middleweight division, easy. And then you got Virgil Ortiz. So when I take a look, at the middleweights and junior middleweights, and then I look at the young middleweights, I see a lot of promise coming our way at the middleweight division. And I'm excited about it because, if we can get some really good middleweights fighting each other, they're big. They're you see the knockouts. They usually are very skillful, across the board. And to have these guys, fight each other, that's the way it is. My man Orlando is in there. I can't wait to see you again in June.